Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like Diamonds, got Luke Simons, like
Like diamonds.
there it is. Three bad habits every fisherman should give up. Three bad habits. There's probably many more, but these are three of the biggest ones that we see over and over again. These are the same three that we did personally over and over again, which led to a lot of frustration. It led to a lot of skunked days. It led to some humiliation. And it certainly led to a lot of wasted time and money. And I don't know that it's ever something that you just solve all three of these. Even as I look down this list of these three, I'm still guilty of this sometimes. We're always constantly learning. That's why Salt Strong, meaning us, the royal we are always out there on the water testing this stuff ourselves, sometimes shocking the heck out of ourselves with things that we're learning that we've been doing wrong for us sometimes, 20 plus years with some pretty surprising results. And then we report back to you, Salt Strong Nation. And of course, our insider members get a little bit inside access and get to see all of our fishing spots and where we fish and get access to the courses and smart fishing spots. And the list goes on and on and on and on. But we still like to report as much as we can back to everyone because it goes back to our mission of helping anglers save time and money, uniting friends and families through fishing. So please, please, please listen to this one all the way through. I am certain, regardless if you're a newbie or if you're just a weekend warrior, or if you even fish all the time, you will get something out of this episode. So, the first one, the first bad habit is sticking with the wrong equipment, not pivoting enough, right? We always talk about simplification here. Don't believe that you need to have an entire tackle store of stuff. The same point, you need to know when you should be using specific equipment. So the first one is wrong equipment. And Luke has multiple stories on this. We had, a member not that long ago, someone that we ran into, and he was talking, and we had like an epic day. Remember Luke? And he's like, "Man, I didn't catch anything." He's right near next to us, and Luke started someone like, "Show me what you're using." And he's like, "I'm using the same stuff you guys recommend, the slam shading." He's like, "Well, let me see everything." And the guy had 20-pound braid, right? Fishing, super skinny water. And it looks like, well, man, that could be part of the problem, and it was. So Luke, talk about this, the wrong equipment issue.
Yeah, equipment's a big deal. And to that guy in particular, it was like a 6 foot rod with a 4,000 size reel and 20-pound braid trying to get redfish in skinny water that's highly pressured. It's not going to happen.
Yep.
It's literally, you can't cast far enough. That braid is way too thick. The fish can feel it, if not see it, and they're just going to spook off. And so if you're using the wrong equipment, you're setting yourself up for failure in many cases. And the more pressure your area gets, the more important this is. So anybody fishing around Tampa Bay, listen carefully. And really most of Florida, really most of the Southeast now, there's a lot of fishing pressure. And so equipment's a big deal. The number one thing that I see people doing wrong, and that we both did it, Joe and I both did it as well, is using too strong a gear. We were going with 20-pound or more line just so that we'd be ready in the small chance that it happened that we hooked into a 50-pound redfish next to some docks, right next to the pilings. Like, yes, you do want to be prepared for what you're probably going to encounter, but in most cases, going down to 10-pound braid for inshore fishing is plenty, especially if you're going after redfish and trout. They're really not that good about getting around structure. And even when they do, there's been multiple times that I pulled overslot and upper slot redfish around pilings with braid. You just have to be careful. You have to be mindful not to damage the line. But the added advantage you get on casting distance, and as long as you're using good knots, you're going to have very strong line that's going to cast an absolute mile, and that's going to all but guarantee that you'll catch more fish than the people using 20 or more pound braid. In most cases, whoever can cast the furthest is going to catch the most fish, especially if you're fishing off the piers, but even off boats. I take people out all the time, and when I look at their equipment, I almost always know who's going to be catching the most fish, and also who's going to be catching the least fish. If somebody has a 4,000 size reel and 20-pound braid, it's almost guaranteed that they're not going to catch many fish. So it's that important, and it's a lesson that I wish I would have learned sooner, because I was going out buying the 4,000 size reels when I should have gotten 2,500s. I was going out and buying 300 yards of 20-pound braid when I should have gone 150 yards of 10-pound braid. So not only is it going to help you save money, but you'll actually be having some better results in many cases as well.
Yep. And we fished with Captain Peter Deeks many times. He's got multiple world records. So this guy's going after some pretty big fish. I mean, he is I would call him a live bait trophy hunter, even though he loves using lures when he's fishing by himself. When he's taking clients who are paying a lot of money to get their own personal best or even a state or world record, he's got a lot of pressure and he's going after elephants. He's going after these big, big, big fish. And you'd be shocked, even when he's going after these monster 30+ inch trout and these, I mean, he caught that one 50-inch redfish, and that was using 15-pound braid. He was under 20 on that was a 4,000 series reel. So did because he had a lot of line capacity. A lot of times he's letting this live bait go really, really far, but otherwise he'd be using a 3,000 series reel for all this and 10 to 15, sometimes 20 if he's going to be in heavy structure. It's really shocking. I think a lot of people get on his boat and he's told us, he's like, yeah, they look at it and like, I thought we were going after big fish today, Captain. He's like, we are. This is what we're using, right? Because I think a lot of people think, oh, I need a 6,000 series, to catch these big 40 and 50-foot, not 50-foot, 50-inch redfish. And there could be times if you're fishing some crazy inlet with all kinds of current and there's structure, sometimes you might need to go a little bit heavier, but never that heavy. And usually you'd be shocked, to Luke's point, what you can get in on even 10-pound braid. I've been experimenting on that new reel, that new Dio I just bought, and our new paired up on one of the demo slot machine rods. I've been using 8-pound, and it is crazy. Like you can feel a difference going down to 8. You've been using 5, Luke. I mean, you can tell a difference in casting. I feel like, I don't know if it's just I had a good day, but I felt like I was getting more fish having the 8 on there. Certainly could cast further. Certainly if you're in an area that's getting a lot of pressure, the lower you can go in that diameter, the better you're going to be. And talk about the 5. I mean, you've even done some experiment with it, haven't you?
Yeah, so I'll go to the 5, but first I just wanted to make something clear. So with live bait, you can get away with thicker lines. So in many cases, live bait, the bait's doing the work, right? And especially if you're like cut bait fishing or dead bait fishing, as long as you can cast decently far, a lot of times the fish will come and find it. And so even though Peter's using live bait, he's still going light because he's actually casting a decent amount and he's letting a lot of line out. He's getting that bait away from the boat as far as possible, knowing that the biggest, smartest fish are most likely going to be the ones that are striking way out of the way, where they know there's danger in the area. They're not going to be hitting close to the boat. So if you're using lures, it's extremely important to go light. If you're using live bait, you can get away with going heavier, but you still need to be mindful of going as light as you can. So the 5-pound story, I was going out doing some sight fishing over the summer, and the redfish were just spooking off. Even I would literally, I would cast way ahead of them, and I would watch my line fall and hit the water, even like 5 feet in front. The line in the lure were all landing way away from the fish. And the lure would hit, and then the line would settle down like 3 or 4 feet in front of it, and I would watch the fish just spook off. And this is 10-pound braids. These are just heavily pressured fish. And so what I did is I realized they can feel this. They can either feel the line, or they're seeing the little ripple of just the line laying on the water. And so I moved down to a 5-pound braid, and that resulted in better fish catching, right? So they were still kind of spooky, but that line is just that much thinner, and they had a harder time picking up on it, which helped just catch more fish. And even that 5-pound braid, I did some knot tests with it, and it was still breaking over 11 pounds with the FG knot and a 15-pound mono leader. And so same for the leader too, right? So use the small leaders you can get away with. I've started going down to even 10-pound leader in many cases, as long as I use a little bite tippet. So I'll do a 10-pound leader, and then like the last 6 inches go up to 20. That way the fish just can't feel it as well. But you have the beefed up business end to handle the abrasion of fish. And even lately, this has been my tarpon setup, right? So even going after tarpon, granted they're juvenile tarpon up to about 30 pounds, I'm still using a 2,500 size reel with 10-pound braid, which is my normal inshore setup. And then I'll have just a bite tippet. You can barely see it here. So here's a uni knot to a bite tippet that goes to 30 pounds, right? So 20-pound top leader, 30-pound bite tippet. And this was absolutely dominating tarpon up in the shallows. It was an absolute blast. Whereas before, I would do a full length of 20 line, and going after tarpon, I would have been using a 20-pound braid or even more, and I wouldn't have had any of the results I just had, because I would only be able to cast a fraction of the distance, and the fish could more easily pick up on the line. I even did a casting contest on a 10-pound braid versus a 20-pound braid, all else being equals, it was Power Pro. Original Power Pro had on the same rod, the same reel, and the 10-pound braid was casting an extra 15 plus feet per cast. It was like an extra 20%. And just doing the math, it was like an extra football field every like 15, 20 casts. And there's not much in fishing that you can do to guarantee you catch more fish than to be able to cast further every cast. So it's one of the
Speaking of,
few things we actually have complete control over.
yep.
And again, we did for many years, we just didn't even think about it, and we were just going after the hopefully we catch the hook into the giant fish, and we'll be able to have a good shot with it.
Yep. So speaking of that, this ties in with equipment and casting is the rod. You mentioned that one gentleman we ran into at the ramp showed us what he's using, a little 6-foot live bait rod, and that it's okay if you're just dropping straight down with live bait or cut bait, but the rod, I guess a good analogy, Luke, you're pretty serious about tennis, and Luke plays in little tournaments on the side. There's a massive difference between having like a really nice, let's just say $300 or $400 rod with brand new strings on it versus like a $50 30-year-old rod that hasn't had new strings in that same amount of time. There's a massive difference in equipment, and it's the same when you get a real legit rod and you make a cast, not just the cast, but the hook set, the feel, everything, it is night and day difference. And so many people, we fished with some friends not that long ago, they're not catching anything. I'm like, let me see what you got. Same thing. He had a really nice reel, had a really nice, like, a couple $100 Daiwa reel, and the rod was just like an afterthought. It was an absolute dud. And I was like, dude, this thing's horrible. He could barely cast it. So talk about that, because that rod is so critical. And that's why we're spent so much time trying to create this slot machine. This is our up and coming rod that is next level. It's not for everyone. This is not for beginners. Just like a beginner doesn't need a $400 tennis racket. Like, start somewhere in the middle and work your way up. But talk about the power of a rod there, Luke. Not the power, but the power of a good rod.
The importance, the
Oh,
importance
yes.
of it. And so having a good fishing rod is way more important than having a good tennis racket. Because the tennis racket, there's a lot more involved, like with the actual swing, than like fishing rod. It's literally that's the thing that controls everything. It helps you cast further, which is a small flick of the wrist. With a good rod, you can absolutely sling it further than most people do when they're power casting with an inferior rod. Also, the feel of strikes, the hook sets, handling the fish, the rod does so much. And so for many years, as Joe mentioned, we would prioritize the reel over the rod. And we see it all the time too. And it's a huge mistake. I personally would spend like $200 on a reel, thinking that was my problem for not catching as many fish as I wanted. And then the rod was the afterthought. Rod just get like a $60 rod, whatever I could find at Walmart. Horrible idea, right? So even now, I'm literally using a $60 reel. This is the Daiwa Legalis, and I'm putting on a $350 rod. So because I now know that the priority should be on the rod, go as big as you can on the rod, and then the reel is the afterthought. This Legalis, $60, and handles great. This is what I was catching all this tarpon with. I just use it for on the paddle board, knowing that I'm eventually going to fall in and dunk it or do something stupid and mess it up. So in case when that happens, I'm not going to be quite as upset. And so far, it's holding up great. I've had this for a long time, and I have multiple of them. They work great. They last long. Shockingly good for such a price point like that. But again, most importantly, it's about just putting the rod up there. So rod number one, line number two, reel is the third most important. So make sure to have that order when you're going out and making your tackle purchases, because that's totally opposite than most people. A lot of people are putting the reel up top, spending way too much money, and then they're missing out on really the most important, I would say the more important things. Again, this
Yep.
is mostly for lures, right? Because lures, you're actively casting. With line bait, you have a little bit more room to be a little bit sloppy on that, I should say, because again, the live bait is doing a lot of the work. You're not having to work quite as hard. But if you're using lures and you're casting, you need that good feel. You need that casting distance. Having a good rod is crucial, extremely important.
Which ties into bad habit number 2. Excellent segue there, Luke. And bad habit number 2 is only fishing with live bait, or only feeling like you can catch fish with live bait. We have so many friends here in Florida that fit this description. and they're puzzled on how we catch so many fish without it. I'm puzzled how they can't figure out not to have to rely on it every single time. And we placed and made a decent chunk of change. Was $1,000+ in a tournament there, and we were the only team using lures. Everyone else is live bait, and it just so happened that a front end came through, and you weren't allowed to get your live bait until that morning of, and none of them get live bait. Like, it took them half the morning just to get enough live bait for the boat. We're already out there catching fish. And every single guide in talking head that we've had on here, talking heads, I mean the guys who have their own fishing TV shows. Every single one of them have said, man, like, the one thing I would tell everyone is become proficient at using lures. It gives you so much more control. It gives you so much more freedom, so much more flexibility, whether you're on vacation in a brand new spot, you're at a work event and just want to go out fishing on the beach for a little while, or if you're in an area like a beach or a kayak and you don't want to be lugging around live bait or don't have access to a live well. It is game changing and it's really fun. I mean, to me, like, live bait's almost kind of boring sometimes. Sometimes it's incredibly exciting. But to me, like, not being able to cast and just sitting throwing something out and waiting, I was like, man, I can't believe we used to do this, because that's all we did. So I'm talking from experience. That's all we did for the longest time. And we wouldn't fish. Remember in the wintertime, like, we just kind of gave up because we're like, we don't know how to fish without it. And it was tough to find. So we just kind of stopped fishing. That was certainly a bad habit that we continue to see over and over again.
Yeah, and we're not saying that live bait is bad and it doesn't work. It's just that it's not a requirement,
Don't be
and
held
it's
hostage to it. It's the bad
yeah, just
habit.
don't be held hostage. It's interesting that most freshwater anglers only use lures and like a minority use live bait, and then on the saltwater side, it's the opposite. Most people use live bait, and to me, saltwater fish are way more aggressive than bass. I was a total bass addict for many years. I still enjoy doing it, but saltwater fish are more aggressive. And so if you can catch bass with lures, then you 100% can catch many saltwater fish, snook, redfish, sea trout, flounder with lures as well. Very similar behavior patterns, very similar retrieve styles. It's just a matter of getting the right lure for the right depths, and again, and maximizing casting distance, which is more important for the saltwater environment. But yeah, it's shocking how effective lures can be. And back in the days when we were in high school and college, we can get away more with the live bait, because even if bait was tough to get, we would have like all day long to fish, right? Not as many responsibilities back then. Now it's rare that I have more than 3-4 hours to go fish. And so I don't want to spend a big percentage of that messing with live bait. I would rather just go out where I can immediately go to the first spot while the sun's coming up. I have my favorite lure for whatever depth zone and whatever season it is, and catching fish automatically, right? Catching fish right then versus having to have that live bait step in there. And also, if you're not on the water a lot, live bait just slows you down, where you can't move as fast, right? You have to, like, you can't actively cast a live bait. So if you don't know exactly where the fish are holding and you don't know where the bait is, if you don't know both of those like immediately, then you're really setting yourself for failure, right? Because it's more of a guessing game. Whereas with lures, you can immediately start casting and covering water, and you're going to cover way more water so that you have a much higher chance of success on getting into that really good feeding zone. So lures help you to save time where you can immediately start fishing, but most importantly is they just help you cover more water. So if you are able to cover water, it's huge. If you have a boat with a trolling motor, lures are incredibly valuable. If you're fishing from shore or from a pier and you have a fixed location where you can't move around a lot, that's when lures can be tougher to compete with live bait, right? Because you're going to be in one area. There's probably going to be other people with live bait. So that's the time where live bait would be more important. But if you're wade fishing or in a kayak or have a boat and you can move, it's shocking how effective lures can be if you just give them a chance. Most people like us, we just never gave it a chance for many years. And now it's probably my biggest regret, because we're just going to the same spots and sitting there for sometimes a couple hours not catching anything. Whereas if we would have just used lures and started moving around, we would have found way more spots way faster than we ever did.
Yep. It's basically just a bad habit, right? I think it's
Yeah.
been passed on from many, many generations of fishermen in the saltwater, just like the bass guys. It's different habit, right? It's been passed on. Hey, yeah, use lures, use plastic worm, give me an old culprit Berkeley, right? That's all you need. A little, maybe a horny toad. But it really is a bad habit. And to your point, Luke, it's not like we're saying you should never use live bait. We use live bait. It's you know what it's like fast food. It's good. It tastes good, but you shouldn't eat it for every single meal all the time. You should at some point put a salad in your stomach. So it's something that we all as anglers, to be a complete angler, I believe is what Peter Deeks called it. To be a complete angler, you need to learn how to do both. And there are times when you're going to need to learn or to know how to do each one. And I'm just telling you, like, if you're still on the fence, just give it a try. Join our insider club. We have more than anyone out there on how to basically convert yourself from a live bait person to artificial lures in the quickest and easiest way possible. And it is about simplification, right? It's you don't need a billion lures; you just need a couple. And we've even done a couple of podcasts on that. But we have all kinds of little courses on how to do that. It'll make your life so much more simple and just so much more enjoyable. And what's interesting too, I think part of the bad habit on the recreational side is they, especially here in Florida, they see all these captains that go out there and live bait. And I would too if I was a captain, and there's a reason they do. But talking to a lot of these captains offline, they either like Peter Deeks, I mean, who's into fly fishing and stuff, and uses our lures when he's fishing by himself or with his friends. A lot of them say, "Man, I'd love to use lures more often." The problem is, most of the people who come on my boat don't really know how to cast, and or I have 4 or 5 people all fishing together, and that's just not safe to have that many, things being whipped around. Once again, when people aren't the best casters. But some people, like even like Hollywood, he loves it. He's got a handful of clients who he knows are really good at casting, and they only do artificial lures. So there are captains that do that, but it's more of like a liability on them, and they want to make sure that their clients or clientele actually knows how to make casts and is comfortable doing it. But it is interesting that most of the guides out there have live bait, and I think, that's all if that's all you see and that's how you assume, hey, they're the best and they only use live bait, and I assume, right? Because I mean, Florida Sportsman, like if you read that back in the 90s, that's all they talked about. I mean, they barely talked about lures. I mean, DOA might get a little shout out every once in a while, mirror lure, but other than that, there was just no one really talking about lures for saltwater fish. And then Berkeley Gulp came along, but other than those three, it wasn't that big of a market. And now it seems to be exploding, which is good.
Yeah,
It's
now let me add just
yeah,
a shameless promo. So just this has been a big issue with a lot of anglers. So we put together a bundle. So it's on fishtron.com. It's called the Ultimate Inshore Tackle Bundle, and it just includes the best of the best lures. It's the top lures that can basically make sure that you're prepared regardless of what you come across. If you were going after redfish, sea trout, snook, flounder, also triple tail and juvenile tarpon, love these lures as well.
yep,
But you get the lures. Plus, you get, as soon as you complete the purchase, you get an email with the education on exactly how to choose the right lure for the right situation. Obviously, how to rig it, how to retrieve it, and then we even send some cheat sheets on each season on how to just find the fish quickly each season, just to make sure that you can maximize results. Because again, there's a lot of people out there, and again, it just saved us so much time and energy once we finally gave lures a shot, especially once we started getting used to them and getting informed on how to use them. This way you can get it all in one swoop. It's at fishstrong.com. You get it all at a 10% discount.
excellent. All right, the next one, the third bad habit is going out there with no pre-trip plan, basically winging it, right? And that usually means if you don't have any pre-trip plan, what do, Luke?
Go back to the old spot where you caught them last time.
Same old spot as last time.
Yeah, the
It,
spot, the GPS spot.
yeah. And this is what I alluded to in the very beginning when I said we're all guilty of this sometimes because we've done it. There's been times where you wake up late and you just didn't put the time in to do any pre-trip planning. Now we don't have to with smart fishing spots. Really is taking the learning curve down big time. You still got to put time in though. So we're all guilty of this. We all say, oh, we'll just go back to that same old spot. There were definitely redfish there last time, but that is probably the ultimate killer. Um, I mean,
Not
that's
probably, definitely.
yeah,
That's
definitely
definitely.
the ultimate killer of, and when I say killer, meaning the thing holding you back from consistent results is going back to those same old spots. Fish move, right? They certainly move every day, like tide cycles, they're moving. We know they move during seasons, right? I mean, some of them are going offshore to spawn, some are going way up in the creeks at certain times of year. I mean, they're constantly moving. They're not like bass, whereas bass, for the most part, they are moving during the year. But the bass for a lot for for sometimes for a month will kind of stay in the same little piece of structure, maybe kind of come out occasionally. But a lot of the bass, they say when they release them, go back to that same old spot. So they're a little bit different. But man, these redfish and trout and snook and flounder, they are just flat out moving. So you got to understand trends, right? You have to understand the fish biology, and you have to be able to like look at tide charts or smart fishing spots and start looking at these satellite maps and start coming up with a pre-trip plan, and then taking into consideration things like the wind, right? And the temperature and what happened, the day before and what's happening now, the moon phase. I mean, all that stuff comes into play, which is why we built that smart fishing spot system. We're basically did all the grunt work for you. That's what it comes down to, right? Because there is a lot of grunt work that goes on behind the scenes, especially when you're just starting to do your pre-trip plans. It can be overwhelming. There's a lot of stuff. So smart fishing spots is more of a kind of a done for you or done with you system, and is taking in new data every 15 or 20 minutes, right? I mean, that's why it's changing constantly, and helping you gives you some predictive spots on where you should start looking first. Is it always right? No, of course not. Nothing's perfect. But as it gets closer to the time you're fishing, it is really, really, really getting fine tuned. We're getting testimonials coming in every day from it. But that is the number one issue. And so, thoughts on that, Luke? On same old spots, no pre-trip plan.
Yeah, I mean, it just comes down to setting yourself up for success. If you could just go back to a spot because you caught a good fish there last week or last, or even worse, last year, right? That doesn't mean much. And so if you're not taking into account the current flow on how it's hitting that particular spot, or what the water depth is at that particular spot, if you're not thinking about the wind, and is it pushing water onto that area, or is it like a wind blown area that's not getting any wind? If you're not putting that into account, based on the season, you're not going to be consistent. You're not going to get consistent results. And again, we know because we did that for many years. I remember being so happy with Dennis Ost. He took us, we were really struggling with inshore fishing, really good bass fishing. We grew up on a lake, and we were just getting very frustrated with inshore. We were able to catch some trout, but we would like rarely ever catch redfish, and even fewer snook. And I remember Dennis took us out. We went to this area, and we caught a slam in one spot. And I remember being so happy, where we're just like, finally, and it wasn't that far from the area that we normally fish. We were down at Low Gasparilla Island. And so like we have a slam spot 5 miles from where we stay most of the time. So happy. And then we go there without Dennis a few weeks later at a different tide and a different wind that we didn't even think about it. And we got skunked. And so then we're like, we thought we were failures. Like, we're like, oh my gosh, we're just terrible fishermen. Like, we know they're here. They were there, right? And they were coming back at certain situations, but we just didn't think about it. Like, we weren't even, literally didn't even cross our minds to take that into account. And that's really the most important thing, because as Joe mentioned, these fish are moving based on the tides, just based on how they feel. They're not smart. Fish are not smart at all. All they're doing is reacting to their changing environment. The inshore saltwater fisheries, the waterways are constantly changing, the currents moving back and forth, the temperatures going up and down, and those fish move, but they're very predictable as well. So as long as you know how they move and why they move, then you can consistently start putting yourself where they're going to be based on the conditions. And so that's really what we teach in the Insider Club. We have a Finding Spots mastery course that goes to the low level details where you can do it yourself. Or as Joe mentioned, we have the software that really does it for you, does a lot of it for you, but nothing will beat knowing it yourself, right? You can never beat that. So that's why we have that course that just hammers it home and goes directly at the details.
Yep. So that's it. Those are the three main habits. If you just keep those three things in mind and avoid them, you will have so much more fun and more success and more consistency. And if you want help with any of it, come join us in the Salt Strong Insider Club. Over 35,000 members from Texas to now up to New York and everywhere in between. More people joining literally every hour, which is really awesome. The best news is it's now less expensive than the cup of coffee per week. It used to be per day, when coffee used to be pretty affordable. Now it's cup of coffee. It's probably cup of coffee every other week, less, right? It's $1.87 per week. However much you pay for your coffee, but even like inexpensive coffee is $1.87, and Starbucks you can spend $4 or $5 sometimes on that stuff. So yeah, it comes down to 27 cents per day, $1.87 per week. It's an investment in yourself, and you will save time for sure, and you will save money for sure. And we save money because we have everything in our store is 20% or even sometimes more off, which is really really awesome. And we have some members who save $500-600 a year just on the tackle savings alone. So come join us there. That's over at saltstrong.com. For you current members, thank you guys so much. We appreciate you big time. Got some really neat things coming in the community. We have a whole new dashboard we've been working on for forever. This thing is going to be epic. We've heard you in terms of things that you want to see, and now you have everything from the tides in your area, whatever area you want to put as your default, to be able to see all the latest news, any new offers or new tackle for sale, stuff like that. It's going to be all there on one little dashboard for you. So it's coming really, really soon. Really pumped for you to see that. So thank you guys big time. What else, Luke? Anything else?
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing. If you are new to us, just know that we do stand behind all of our products. And so this club, as Joe mentioned, it's just $97 a year, which equates to $1.87 per week. But we stand behind it. So if you get in there and you don't think it's amazing, if you don't see that you're catching more fish and that you're not saving money on your tackle, to let us know and we'll refund the entire thing. We stand behind it. You have an entire year to make sure that you absolutely love it. And I just wanted to throw out there, we just wish that somebody gave us a no risk offer like this when we were struggling. It would have saved us countless years and no telling how many hundreds, probably thousands of dollars buying the wrong equipment. So saltstrong.com, you see the pricing page. Again, risk is on us. We can't wait to see how it helps you. We have now over 30,000 members, and we think you're gonna love it as well, just based on the feedback we've been getting. So it's all there ready for you to start catching more fish and saving money while doing so.
Yep. And Luke mentioned if you're struggling, but even if you're not struggling, if you just want to get better, which all of us should, we're using the same stuff that we're teaching because we're always trying to get better. And we have many full-time guides who have joined that want to become better at using lures and want to understand even the, reading maps and how to find spots better. Using some of this latest and greatest technology. So all kinds of different people, regardless of where you are in your fishing journey, we have people who are in your shoes and have been in your shoes and are willing to help. So come join us there at saltstrong.com. Otherwise, guys, we appreciate you big time, and we'll talk to you on the next episode. Peace. We out.